I'm going to begin talking to you about some of the secular good stories around the world, and one of them seems to be US, which is growing faster than expected, and India. Let me talk about the good news first. From a company's point of view, from GE's point of view, how heartening are these two secular stories?
They're very good. Certainly strength in the U.S. economy helps everybody. It helps the world grow. It's a big consumer of global goods, so there's nothing wrong with the U.S. growing, and we should all like that. And with respect to India, we're all optimistic about the new government. The growth rate looks fine, and we think that there's going to be plenty of room for companies like ours and others to grow.
You're not the only one. The entire world believes that a good, robust growth in the U.S. economy is good for everybody across the world. Let me ask you a question. You've been a veteran of sorts as far as industry is concerned. Is U.S. now the single engine of growth that it once used to be?
No, I don't think it's the single engine of growth. I think it's an important engine of growth. I think China, even with growth rates in the low 7% range, is a hugely important engine of growth. It's the world's second largest economy. I think for us, the Middle East, now that's multiple countries obviously, was our strongest region last year. So I would add that to your list of good places for economic growth, driven by infrastructure demand, even with all the geopolitical challenge that comes with the region.
I'm glad you spoke about the Middle East because I was going to ask you this question. The whole geopolitical challenge that the world has seen, communal tension across the border in France, the rise of ISIS, businesses aren't really prepared for an uncertainty like this. How difficult is it to maneuver in this new global context?
Well, you simply have to be prepared for uncertainty. So if you think about last year at this time when you and I spoke, we weren't talking about ISIS.
That's right.
We weren't talking about the Ukraine and Russia's involvement there. And those dominated the agenda in many respects for a big part of 2014. And I suspect next year there'll be 2 or 3 new things on the list that we'll be talking about. We have to learn to operate in that environment. So one of the advantages we have, we're active in 170 countries, is we expect that on any given day, 10 of them are going to be in the headlines for the wrong reasons.
That's right.
And you know, that's just the world that we're going to live in. We still have to deliver results for our customers and our shareholders.
Fair point indeed. Let's just finish the good story before we move on to some of the tension points in the world. Like you say, that in the Middle East region, or India for that matter, or the US, which are the sectors that you're betting on will be the leaders in the story for revival?
Well, we think it's important for some of the big infrastructure projects to move forward. I think that would be a great signal outside of India that the new government is ready to move forward and take actions. You and I have talked in the past about rail modernization. That's very important to us. Whether that's one of the projects or not, it matters to us, but it doesn't matter in total. There needs to be progress that external investors can say, yep, India's open for business, they're ready to move forward, and we want to invest.
I want to ask you the other question on India. It's been in the news for all the right reasons. It's making the right noises. How much of the reality has really changed on the ground for corporations like yourselves and, of course, for smaller businesses?
I think it's starting to change. As you know, the BJP, not only at the federal level, at the state level, excuse me, has had good success, and I think that's going to help coalesce things around movement. So I think it will change, but big infrastructure has to move forward to be part of that change. The other thing is I think the government could take advantage of the low oil prices to start reducing to reduce subsidies so that gets taken off the table. You know, as oil prices, as they inevitably will, start to increase.
I'm going to speak about oil and how that has changed business in this new global context in a while from now. But I have one more question on India, and that is, of course, the right noises that the government has made around liberalization of FDI across sectors, be it defense, be it insurance. Some of these sectors are open for business. What kind of a role do you expect GE to play, say, as far as defense is concerned?
Well, we want to play an active role. We're interested in localizing some of our activities. We're an important provider for military and jet engine technology and helicopters, and so we expect to be able to do more there as soon as the government decides what it wants companies like us to do.
I'm going to talk to you about the other bit that you mentioned, which is low oil prices in the world. Nobody saw this coming. The world feared peak oil. Now it looks like the world is fearing cheap oil. Oil did plummet to levels of 45. It's back to around 50. When do you see oil begin to rise? What is the new normal for oil? And how does low commodity change lives for people like yourselves?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy, because I was not predicting 50 when it was at 100.
Right.
And I remember when it was 140, there were people talking about 200.
That's right.
Nobody was talking that it would someday get back down to 50. So there's a certain amount of emotion that's in the price of a barrel of oil. There's economic demand. There's a lot of factors. It could stay around 50 for a while, and certainly as we prepare our oil and gas business, we're not expecting a quick bounce back. We think that's the prudent thing to do. But it's like any other economic cycle that we face. We use it as an opportunity to make a stronger business, to cut back in areas where we need to cut back, and we expect to come out of it even stronger in the oil and gas space.
The reason why I ask you this question is that there is plenty of investment around the world, in the US, other parts of the world, which is tied to oil, which is tied to energy. And that investment, a lot of people fear, could be stalled because of low oil prices. Is that a concern that gathers mind space with you?
Well, I think CapEx will slow down in that space, and so we've positioned our business for revenues at flat or maybe down 5%, and that's a little bit along the lines of what we talked about before. We think that's prudent. Some of the long cycle projects will continue to go on because they can't be turned on and off. I think the other thing $50 barrel oil does is it cuts out some of the marginal projects that maybe shouldn't have happened anyways. And some of the shale stuff in the United States will get curtailed, but you could argue that some of those projects were marginal to begin with, and maybe it will be better if they don't get done.
Fair point indeed. I have a question to ask you on the elephant in the room that everybody seems to be worried about or is losing some sleep over, and that's, of course, China. You say even with the 7 to 6% growth, it is still not growing so badly as the rest of the world believes. How concerned are you about soft landing or hard landing, whatever you call, in China?
Well,
And what does this really do to global commodity prices and Australia, for that matter, emerging markets?
I think China's growth at 7%, is responsible. People have been predicting a hard landing in China for a long time.
Yes.
It hasn't happened. I've always been of the view that the Chinese leadership is really quite competent at managing their economy, and I believe that the soft landing is what we're seeing. And I think that it will continue to be that for a while. As a consumer of global goods, China is an important market. And there's no question over time their demand for raw materials will come back, and that will lead to higher prices at some point.
My last question to you, as the vice chairman of one of the biggest companies in the world, GE, what are the three things that you wary of in 2015, and perhaps the three or the two things that are putting your thoughts to rest and giving you some hope?
Well, the main thing I think about is in this world where you have unexpected geopolitical turbulence, we have to have great people on the ground who can help us navigate. You don't steer this ship from some headquarters location and read headlines and react to those. You have to have good people, trustworthy people on the ground in lots of places so that you can sort through what your role is, whether that's an abrupt government transition, an orderly transition, a democratic transition. We have to figure out what our role is, and then we have to execute. So I want trustworthy people who operate with openness and transparency. I want to be aligned with government agendas. So whether it's the Modi government, the government in China, the Jokowi government in Indonesia, we need to be lined up with their agendas, and then we have to execute. So we have to do what we say we're going to do. There's a huge premium on that. If you're putting electricity on the grid,
that's right,
adding health care to the people, healthcare capability in the places where it's needed, you can't miss. There's an expectation now from populations in India, in Indonesia, in China, that their governments are going to deliver for them, and we're part of that delivery mechanism, we have to do what we say we're going to do.
Plenty of hope riding on you. Thanks very much for speaking to us. Pleasure.
Thanks.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.